It was supposed to be just another rehearsal, a quiet night inside Graceland's studio. But when Elvis Presley sat down at the piano, something changed. He told his band to stop playing and whispered, "This one's not for the crowd." Then he began singing a song so personal that no one in the room dared to breathe. March 1977, Memphis, Tennessee. The clock in Graceland's basement studio read 11:47 p.m. outside. The gates were quiet. No screaming fans, no flashbulbs. Just rain tapping against the windows and the hum of old amplifiers. Inside, the band was restless. Charlie Hodge tuned his Gibson, Felton Jarvis checked the levels on the console, and Elvis sat alone at the white piano, staring at the keys like they might answer something. "Charlotte first, right?" Charlie asked, trying to fill the silence. "Then Indy." Elvis didn't respond. He just pressed one key, softly, and the note drifted through the room like a question nobody wanted to answer. He'd done 1,000 rehearsals in this room, but tonight felt heavier. He was thinner now, the sparkle in his eyes dulled but still stubborn. His gold cross necklace swung slightly as he leaned forward. Felton tried again. You want the guys to run the set list?" Elvis finally looked up. "No, Felton." His voice was quiet, almost kind. "Not tonight." The band froze. "Not tonight?" Charlie asked. Elvis shook his head. I ain't got it in me to pretend tonight." He stood and walked to the small fridge, pulling out a bottle of Gatorade. The cap clinked on the floor. He didn't pick it up. From the corner of the room, the red recording light blinked. Tape rolling, just in case genius happened by accident. Elvis glanced at the reel and smiled faintly. "Turn that off," he said. Felton hesitated. "You sure?" "Yeah," Elvis said. Then after a pause, "Actually, leave it." He sat back down at the piano, brushing dust from the lid. The ivory felt cool under his fingertips. "I had a dream last night," he said softly, almost to himself. "She was there again. Scylla. She was Logan." Charlie stopped tuning. Felton froze mid-note. Elvis smiled at the memory, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was like the old days, before Vegas, before the jumpsuits, just her sitting on the couch watching me play. He looked around the room, meeting no one's eyes. You know what's funny? The louder the crowds got, the quieter her laugh got. Now I can't remember the sound anymore. He struck another chord, slow, minor, heavy. It lingered in the air. "Let's try something else," he said. "No set list tonight. Just real music." Charlie exchanged a quick glance with Felton. "You want backup?" Elvis shook his head. "No, son. Tonight, I'm singing alone." He rolled his shoulders, took a breath, and started playing a soft progression in E major. The melody was familiar but slower, aching. Felton leaned forward, whispering to Charlie, "He's driftin' again." Elvis heard him and smiled. "I ain't driftin', Felton. I'm remembering." He closed his eyes and began humming the opening bars of Always on My Mind. Charlie felt goosebumps rise on his arms. It wasn't performance Elvis, it was the man beneath the crown. The first line came out barely above a whisper. "Maybe I didn't treat you." He stopped halfway through, staring at the ceiling. The room held its breath. Then he sighed, voice cracking. "Lord, I should have said that to her while I could." No one dared speak. Even the old fluorescent lights seemed to dim. Elvis brushed his fingers across the keys, his touch trembling now. "I ain't sure I ever told her what she meant to me." Charlie swallowed hard. "You told her plenty." He shook his head. "Not the right way." Outside, thunder rolled over Memphis. Elvis straightened up, eyes suddenly clear. "You boys ever feel like the music starts singing you instead of the other way around?" No one answered. He smiled sadly. "That's where I'm at tonight." He looked back at the piano, hands poised. "And if this turns out to be my last song, well," he shrugged lightly, "at least it's for the right person." The red recording light blinked again, steady and silent, as he pressed the first note that would change the room forever. What do you play when the music no longer feels like yours? The first few piano notes drifted through the Graceland basement like smoke. slow, fragile, and uncertain. Every man in the room could feel it. This wasn't rehearsal anymore. It was confession. Elvis kept his eyes closed as he played, his fingers barely grazing the keys. The sound wasn't perfect, it was better. It was human. Charlie Hodge leaned on his guitar, watching the king of rock and roll sound like a man searching for forgiveness. The tape reel spun quietly. Felton Jarvis whispered, "Should I stop it?" Charlie shook his head. "No. Let it roll." Elvis's voice broke the silence, soft but deliberate. "You ever notice," he said, "how people look at you like you're already a memory?" Felton frowned. "What do you mean?" Elvis looked up, his blue eyes dim but steady. "They see me as him, the king. The jumpsuits, the TV shows, the Vegas lights. But that ain't me, not anymore. That's just the picture they kept after the man walked off." He pressed a single key, middle C, and let it ring until it faded. "I dreamed about her again last night," he said. Charlie froze. He didn't have to ask who. "She was Logan," Elvis continued. "Not the smile for the camera's laugh. The real one. The one she had when I'd screw up a lyric and she'd fall over giggling." He smiled faintly, his hands hovering above the keys. "You know what she said in that dream?" Felton shook his head. Elvis's voice softened. "She said, 'You still owe me a song.'" The room went quiet. Outside, thunder rolled across Memphis again. Low, slow, and heavy. Charlie swallowed. "Maybe you should write it then, E." Elvis nodded. "That's exactly what I'm gonna do." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. Creased, worn, maybe months old. He laid it on the piano lid, smoothing it out carefully. "Been working on something since last summer," he said. "Couldn't finish it. Guess I wasn't ready." He looked up at the ceiling as if speaking to someone unseen. "But I reckon she's waitin' for it now." Felton adjusted the mic, voice trembling. "You want us to back you?" Elvis shook his head. "No. This one's not for show." He started to play again. A slow waltz rhythm, delicate and aching. Charlie whispered to Felton, "You feel that?" Felton nodded. "Yeah. Like the air's listening." Elvis's voice came low, almost a prayer. "Funny thing about love," he said between chords. "When you're young, you think it's fireworks. But when it's gone, it's quiet. Too quiet." He smiled faintly, his fingers never stopping. "I used to tell her she was my calm in a noisy world. Guess I didn't realize I was the noise." The men in the room looked at one another, unsure whether to speak or just let him go on. Felton whispered, "He's not talking to us, is he?" Charlie shook his head. "No. He's talking to her." Elvis sighed, rubbing his chest lightly as if steadying his heart. "You know, I spent half my life singing about heartbreak, but I never sang to it. Until now." He began playing the first full verse of Always on My Mind, slower this time. Every word dragged through memory. "Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have." The notes filled the room, warm and broken. Charlie's throat tightened. He'd played alongside Elvis for 20 years, but had never heard him sound like this. Not at Sun Records, not in Vegas, not even at Madison Square Garden. This wasn't a star. This was a man. Elvis reached the line, "Maybe I didn't hold you all those lonely, lonely times," and stopped. His hands hovered. The piano hummed softly beneath his fingertips. He whispered, "That's the part that hurts. The times I wasn't there." No one moved. Even the air conditioner seemed to stop. Then, in a voice barely above a breath, he said, "The music don't fix that, boys. It just tells the truth after it's too late." Felton looked at the recording light, still blinking. "You sure you want this on tape, E?" Elvis looked at him and smiled faintly. "If she ever hears it, tell her it was for her." Charlie turned away, eyes wet. "You think she'll ever know?" Elvis answered without hesitation. "She already does." He leaned back from the keys, staring at the gold records lining the studio wall. "Funny," he murmured. "All those songs, and the only one that matters, she'll never hear live." He pressed the first note again, softer now, his voice cracking like vinyl under a needle. Then he whispered to himself, "Tonight's personal." Felton whispered to Charlie, "What's he doing?" Charlie said, "He's remembering how to be Elvis." Elvis smiled at that, nodding slowly. "Yeah," he said under his breath, "just for her." Outside, the rain began again. Steady, rhythmic, like a metronome keeping time with his heartbeat. And for the first time in months, Elvis didn't feel tired. He felt ready. Can love survive when silence becomes the only song left between two people? The piano creaked softly as Elvis shifted on the bench. The room was dark now, just the glow of a single desk lamp bouncing off the white keys. Charlie Hodge sat in the corner, guitar in his lap, not playing a note. Felton Jarvis stood by the console, hand hovering over the tape switch. No one dared move. Elvis took a slow breath and began to play. The opening chords of Always on My Mind floated through the room, quieter than a whisper, trembling like candlelight. "Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have." His voice was low, fragile, almost breaking. Nothing like the Elvis the world knew. Charlie looked down, pretending not to watch, but his eyes glistened. He'd heard this song 100 times before. Never like this. This wasn't a performance. It was repentance set to melody. Elvis's left hand pressed the bass line harder, his right shaking just slightly. "Maybe I didn't love you quite as often as I could have." Each word seemed to cost him a lifetime. Halfway through the second verse, his voice cracked. He stopped, sighed, and whispered to himself, "Lord, I never told her this part." Felton frowned. "Told who?" Elvis looked up, his eyes distant. "Scylla. I never told her how scared I was to lose her. I thought being famous was enough. Turns out, it just made me lonely." He looked back down at the keys and began to hum, as if searching for something he'd lost. Then he did something no one expected. He added a new verse. Softly, almost too quiet for the mic to catch, he sang, "If I could steal one yesterday, I'd spend it holding you, and if I could buy forgiveness, I'd pay whatever love could do." His voice cracked again. This time he didn't hide it. Charlie felt his chest tighten. The man in front of him wasn't the legend who sold out Vegas. This was the boy from Tupelo. The son, the lover, the sinner trying to make peace with himself. When Elvis reached the chorus again, he closed his eyes. His lips trembled as he whispered her name between lines. "Scylla?" The tape hissed softly under the sound of the piano. He finished the song, pressing the final chord until it faded into silence. No one moved. No one clapped. Even the air seemed to pause, holding its breath with him. Elvis sat there, staring at his own reflection in the glossy black piano lid. "I should have sung that years ago," he said quietly. Charlie finally spoke. "She'd have loved it, E." Elvis smiled faintly. "Yeah, but I didn't sing it for her to hear it. I sang it so I could stop carrying it." He leaned back, shoulders heavy, eyes glassy with relief. "Funny thing about music, it don't lie. You can fake smiles, fake words, fake a whole life on stage. But when you sing from truth, it hurts. It heals, but it hurts." Felton's voice cracked as he asked, "You want me to stop the tape?" Elvis thought for a moment. "No. Keep it. Maybe someday she'll find it." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded photograph, a small black and white of him and Priscilla from the early years. Her head rested on his shoulder. He stared at it for a long moment, then set it atop the piano. "I never sang better than when she was listening," he whispered. "Even when she stopped coming to the shows, I still sang for her." He pressed one last note, soft and pure. "That's what they'll never understand, boys. All the fame in the world don't mean a thing if the one person you're singing to ain't there." The piano went silent again. Only the tape spun, quietly capturing what would become one of the most haunting private moments of his life. Outside, the rain finally stopped. A faint beam of moonlight cut through the blinds, landing right on the photograph. Elvis stared at it, his fingers still hovering over the keys. "Guess she heard me after all," he murmured. And in that quiet, something lifted. The burden, the guilt, the noise, gone. He didn't just finish the song. He finished the apology. What happens when a man finally sings the truth he never said out loud? The final chord still hovered in the air, trembling against the studio walls like it didn't want to die. Elvis's hands stayed on the keys, fingers trembling slightly. His head bowed forward, shoulders rising and falling with each heavy breath. The room was frozen. Felton Jarvis stood behind the console, unable to reach for the stop button. Charlie Hodge, still holding his guitar, looked at the floor. Even the red rec light seemed to dim in the hush. No one moved. It wasn't just the sound that stunned them. It was what they'd seen. The man at the piano wasn't the king of rock and roll. He wasn't the Vegas icon, the television special, or the headline. He was just a man. Tired, human, breaking and healing in the same breath. Elvis slowly lifted his head and whispered, "That's all I got." Charlie's throat tightened. "That's more than enough, E." Elvis turned slightly, eyes glassy under the low lamplight. "You ever feel like the music's been waitin' for you to be honest?" Charlie didn't answer. He didn't have to. Elvis looked back down at the keys. His voice barely carried. "It's strange. I spent my whole life singing to crowds that never knew me. But that song," he tapped the piano softly, "that one knew me better than anyone." He leaned back, running a hand through his damp hair. "You know, I used to think people came for the voice. But now I think maybe they came for the truth, even when I didn't know I was given it." Felton finally stepped closer, careful not to startle him. "E, you want me to rewind that? Maybe play it back?" Elvis shook his head. "No. Don't play it back. I couldn't stand to hear it right now." He stood slowly, his reflection stretching across the piano lid. His white jumpsuit glowed under the yellow light, the rhinestones catching small sparks like embers of the life he'd built, the one now flickering out. Charlie spoke softly. "That sounded like goodbye." Elvis paused. Maybe it was. He picked up the photograph he'd left on the piano, the one of him and Priscilla laughing in the early days. He wiped a fingerprint off the corner, then tucked it into his breast pocket. "I used to sing for applause," he said. "Now I just want to sing for peace." The room stayed silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the tape reel still spinning. Then something unexpected happened. Elvis began humming again. Not always on my mind this time, but something older, something pure. It was "Love Me Tender." He didn't sing the lyrics, just the melody, soft and slow. His eyes closed as if he was seeing her again. Not the woman in the headlines, but the girl from the early days in Memphis, the one who believed in him before the world did. Felton glanced at Charlie, whispering, "He's still in it." Charlie nodded. "Let him be. Don't break the spell." Elvis's voice faded on the last hum. He stayed still for a few seconds, then whispered one word. "Scylla." It wasn't a cry. It wasn't regret. It was gratitude. He finally stood, running a hand along the piano's smooth surface like saying farewell to an old friend. "You boys can pack it up," he said softly. "That's all I needed tonight." Charlie cleared his throat. "You sure, E? We can finish the set tomorrow." Elvis smiled faintly. "Ain't nothing left to finish, son. I just did what I came down here to do." He walked toward the door, stopping halfway. "Felton." Felton straightened. "Yeah, boss. Keep the tape." Felton blinked. "You said to erase it." Elvis turned back, eyes distant but clear. "Yeah, but I changed my mind." He placed his hand against the studio door frame, exhaling slowly. "If she ever comes back here, if she ever wants to know what I meant to say, you play it for her." Then he smiled, small and tired. "But not before." Felton nodded. "I got you, E." Elvis looked around the room one last time. Every inch of it carried ghosts. Laughter, sweat, music, memories. He whispered, "Thank you, fellas, for letting me be real tonight." Charlie started to speak, but couldn't. His eyes stung. Elvis gave a gentle nod, opened the door, and stepped out into the hallway. The sound of his boots echoed down the marble corridor, soft at first, then fading. For several seconds, no one spoke. The red light on the console still glowed. The tape reel slowed, the final hiss filling the silence. Felton finally pressed stop. The machine clicked. He looked down at the label space on the reel and picked up a pen. Slowly, he wrote in small block letters, Graceland Session, March 77 Private. Charlie let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. You think she'll ever hear it? Felton stared at the reel in his hand. Someday, he said quietly. And when she does, she'll know he meant every word. The tape hissed one last time before the reels stopped completely. No one moved, and in that stillness, it felt like the whole world had paused, listening to a song only love could understand. Can a single moment of truth stop time itself? 3 months later, the white piano sat silent in Graceland's basement studio. The lamp Elvis used still leaned to one side, its bulb half burned out. Dust had begun to settle on everything, the music stands, the microphone, even the reel-to-reel machine still labeled in Felton's handwriting. Graceland Session, March 77, Private. Felton hadn't erased it. He couldn't. He'd locked the tape in a small drawer in the control room the night Elvis died. Some things, he whispered then, aren't meant for the world. But the world came anyway. News crews filled the gates of Graceland that August. Fans cried, guards wept, and the city went quiet. Inside, the house was a museum of memories, the gold records, the jumpsuits, the photos. Yet the basement studio felt like the only room still breathing. Weeks later, Priscilla walked in for the first time since that night. Felton met her at the door, hat in hand. Ma'am, he said softly, there's something you ought to hear. He led her downstairs, the air heavy with nostalgia and something unspoken. On the piano, the same photograph Elvis had kept. Her and him, young and laughing, still sat propped against the lamp. Felton placed the reel on the machine and pressed play. The hiss of tape filled the room. Then, a single note, soft, trembling, unmistakably Elvis. Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have. Priscilla froze. The sound of his voice wrapped around her like a ghost. Felton turned away to give her privacy. Elvis's voice wavered on the next line, breaking slightly, human and raw. She could hear him breathe between words, could almost see him sitting at that piano again. Then came the part she'd never heard before, the verse he'd added just for her. If I could steal one yesterday, I'd spend it holding you, and if I could buy forgiveness, I'd pay whatever love could do. Her hand flew to her mouth. The tears came quietly, without warning. The tape crackled as he whispered her name, Scylla, almost too soft to catch. She stepped closer to the machine, as though proximity could bring him back. Felton whispered, he told me to erase it, said no one should hear it. Priscilla nodded slowly, eyes still fixed on the spinning reel. Then why didn't you? He smiled faintly. Because I think he wanted me not to. The song ended on the final note. Long, lingering, full of peace. Silence followed. For a moment, the whole world seemed to hold its breath again, just like it had that night. Priscilla exhaled shakily. He finally said it, she whispered. Felton frowned. Said what? She smiled through tears. Goodbye. She reached out, stopped the tape and rewound it carefully. Don't release this, she said. Not yet. Felton nodded. Whatever you want, ma'am. She looked around the room once more. The stool, the piano, the microphone still tilted in his direction. He left everything just as it was, she murmured. Like he knew he'd be back. Before leaving, she placed the photograph on top of the tape box, pressed her hand over it, and whispered, Thank you, Elvis. You found your peace. Years passed. The recording stayed locked in Graceland's vault, until an archivist rediscovered it in 1985. The label had faded, but the handwriting was still clear. When the track finally surfaced among collectors decades later, fans didn't believe it at first. The audio was grainy, half-broken, but unmistakable. You could hear him sigh before the first note, could hear the creak of the piano bench, could feel the weight of everything he'd left unsaid. Those who listened claimed the room itself sounded alive, as if Graceland's walls had learned the melody. Today, that piano still sits there. Tour guides point to it and tell visitors about the night before the tour. Most nod politely. But the real fans, the ones who know, always pause a little longer. They swear the air feels different near that bench, like something sacred never left. And every August, when the memorial lights flicker across the lawn, a faint sound drifts through the open windows. A single piano note, then silence. Some say it's imagination. Others say it's him rehearsing still. Either way, one truth remains. Elvis Presley didn't just sing his last love song for the world. He sang it for the woman who once believed he could be more than the king. Some songs aren't meant to be released. They're meant to be remembered. That night, Elvis didn't perform for fame. He performed for forgiveness. If the story moved you, share it with someone who still keeps a love unspoken. Because sometimes the most unforgettable songs aren't played on stage. They're whispered in the quiet moments when no one moves, and the heart finally tells the truth.